Welcome to SOULutions, where men come out of the shadows to testify, giving tips in manhood, honor the codes of integrity, and give out real solutions for soul survival. Today, we have on the show a multifaceted creator, a man who will help you develop your life through conversation and goal setting. He is unapologetic about his quest to grow integrity and accountability in manhood. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome fellow podcaster, the information technician, the chief executive connector himself, Mr. Pablo Gonzalez.
Sheem, thank you, brother. I love to watch people intro people, man. I think it's very telling when you take the time to create kind of like your own spin on who somebody is. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful attribute, and I'm honored to be on your stage, my friend. So thanks for having me, man. I'm pumped.
Man, I appreciate it. I am super excited to have you here as well. We connected and we knew automatically that we were both on the same journey. I'm excited to. Are you ready to drop these gems today, answer these questions?
So ready, let's go.
All right, here we go. What person did you meet or see that gave you the drive towards the man you are today? Who or what defined you?
There's a couple different ways to answer this, Sheem, right? Like, number one, I've been very blessed with having positive male role models inside of my family. My dad's my hero, my best friend, right? My dad's a guy that left Cuba when he was 14 years old, overnight kind of thing, right? When the Cuban Revolution took off, showed up to Miami and made it, right? Like he's made it based on hard work, integrity, upholding this like very high ethical standard and doing things right. So, number one, I got to say my dad. I got two amazing grandparents, right? My grandfather named Pablo is a dude that started, came from the country in Venezuela, right? Like just like out in the field, oldest of like 9, grabbed his next oldest brother and said, we got to go to Caracas, the capital. I'm going to be a doctor. You're going to be a lawyer. Let's go. And started from zero and built up. My mom's the oldest of 6. And, my grandfather's the guy, he's passed, but started a tree planting nonprofit back in the day. And he's become this guy that, people speak of very fondly and learn to windsurf at the age of like 60 type thing, like that kind of guy. And then my Cuban grandfather, who's probably the funniest dude I've ever met in my life. I don't know if you watched the Dan Le Batard show on SportsCenter, right? But like that like old loud Cuban guy archetype, who again, man, he started this pharma company in Cuba and overnight decided the way that things are going, I got to go to Miami and start over. Right. So I have no excuse on resiliency. And those 3 guys have very, very much shaped my life as well as my uncles. I'm gonna make it more accessible, right? Like I felt very fortunate to come from a well-structured family that supported me and I never really lacked anything. On the other side of that is a whole bunch of expectation of sticking to the program. This is how it worked for us. If you're veering away from this path, does it mean that you don't accept what I did as valuable? And as I became my own man in my life, and I've always been a fence tester, right? Like that scene out of Jurassic Park where it's like the velociraptors test a different part of the fence every single time. I'm always fence testing, man. And I've always walked a pretty traditional path, but it's been because I fence tested everything. And I'm like, oh, okay, the traditional path is what works, right? But throughout my life, I've always felt that I have this expectation on me and I want to deliver on it, right? Like I do feel that I've been given everything I need to strive for greatness and achieve it. I never liked the path laid out in front of me. And as I reached my mid to late 30s and I started formulating my own decisions of, I love the destination. I don't like this path. I want to carve my own path through this jungle. Give me the machete. Let's go. It was getting introduced to Gary Vee, getting introduced to, not person to person Gary Vee, right? But like I was at this conference in my past life. I came from 15 years in the construction industry. And at this point in my life, I had been there. I had never really liked the construction industry. I had succeeded on like just about every level of it, but I never really was into it. And I was sitting there debating whether I take this offer for 130 grand a year base with, with upside of being the head of business development for a construction company that looked just like what the construction company that I worked for that then got acquired and lost its soul, what it was before. And, I believed in that. Or do I go take this really risky partnership for a startup for e-commerce sellers, like a software, and move to Jacksonville and leave everything behind and kind of like reinvent myself and start over? And as you can imagine, my support system wanted me to take, this is the next part of your career. You go take over this head of business development thing in construction. And I just always felt like I was leaving a lot of meat on the bone. And it came from a lack of motivation. I wanted to try something new. At a certain point, I had the conversation with my dad. That's like, listen, man, I know that on paper, this doesn't make sense, but this is about more than that, right? Like, this is about proving to myself if I'm full of shit or not, right? Like if I am really ready to go to bat with my beliefs and my ideals and the things that I have formulated on my own, and whether or not that'll work, and whether my lack of self-perceived lack of work ethic comes from something that I'll never overcome, or if I'm just haven't put myself in the situation where I really just need to show up and make it happen. And as I'm doing that, I go to this green building conference and I'm talking to this developer, a guy a little bit older than me, right? Like, but within my same age range, who is doing really cool stuff. And I'm building rapport. And this is late 2017. So it's like right when like podcasts are becoming a thing, right? Like Serial already happened. I'm already like listening to fantasy football podcasts instead of reading fantasy football articles, stuff like that. And I'm like asking him, so, what are you into these days? Are you listening to podcasts? He's like, yeah, man, I'm on this guy, Gary Vee. And I turn on Gary Vee and I'm literally just trying to build rapport with this dude. So I'm just like, I'm going to give this a shot. I didn't like him at first, right? Like as the hard charging Jersey Jets fan guy did not really speak to me. But as I listened to him more and more, his message of the people in your inner circle that most care for you have a different set of priorities for you, right? They want you to be safe. They don't want you to suffer. There's a certain point where you're reaching this growth spurt in, a personal growth spurt where you're going to have to short-term disappoint those people that are just trying to protect you in order to grow and in order to prove something to yourself, if that's who you think you are. And so that message at that moment in my life really, really mattered to me. And then on top of that, as I watched what Gary Vee was doing, I had just spent the last 10 years networking through nonprofits and being part of nonprofit boards and developing this formulation of like, dude, you can business develop by adding value to people. Like, you don't have to be this like salesy cheese dick that is just trying to convert and trying to like push business cards in front of people's faces and whatnot, and asking for the sale all the time. If you can if you can make yourself more valuable to people's lives than what you ask for, you can sell and be a business developer. You just got to put in the work to do it. And I had never really seen a formula for that outside of spending 10 years in community development and then leveraging that, because that's what I had done. And seeing Gary Vee leverage it through content was very eye-opening. And on top of that, he was the first ever business leader that is undeniably successful, that's also an alpha dude that's out there beating his chest, like, doesn't sound like a hippie, right? That is out there talking about you can win through kindness, you can win through being the person that serves. And that's the language that I had developed. And I'm like, bro, I needed this archetype. And ever since then, Gary Vee has kind of been my North Star. So, at the end of the day, it goes back to something that we were talking about. And the reason why I brought up Gary Vee is because we now have mentorship at scale, right? Like, if you don't come from, I know that I was extraordinarily fortunate to come from like a really healthy family with guys that were ready to invest in me. But if you don't have that, now mentorship is at scale, right? Like I recently read Steve Jobs' autobiography, and I'm reading it and downloading all the knowledge from it. It's great. But there's also Gary Vee, there's also Lewis Howes, there's Tim Ferriss, there's all these people that are out there on a day-to-day basis documenting everything that they're learning. And you don't really need to know them to tap into that genius and have them be your mentor and learn from their lessons of what they're doing. So, to me, the key is find this archetype that really resonates with you and deconstruct it, man. Just like get really deep into their content and how they think. And it's like, yeah, At a certain point, it's going to get repetitive, but you're not looking for their advice. You're looking to see how they live their life and how they make decisions. And you get that by just spending time with them in your ear, reading their books, watching their content, and you're able to reverse engineer and see what fits for you. And you can pick a tribe of those people to be able to do that.
Reverse engineering is one of the biggest things you can do when you're trying to accomplish a goal, right? You get to see it at the end goal, and then you go backwards and figure it out from step by step, what's the best steps for you. And I thank you for sharing that today. Gary V, the Dan Le Batard Show, your uncles, your father, your grandfather, so much to dissect there. There's so many great things that you said. Talk to me about the moment where, because I get this from Jay-Z as well. You quoted something, you quoted Gary V, but I quote Jay-Z when he says, you're not doing all these things to stay the same. And sometimes people want you to stay in a certain box because that's where they met you at. And they don't expect for you to go any further than what you are. Not that they don't care about you. They found comfort in who you are right here, because you're not challenging their ego. You're not challenging their accountability to support you. They just want you to stay right here. Talk to me about the moment that you decided to say, hey, I love my family. I love the roadmap, but there's a new way about, I'm a construction worker for 15 years. I know new terrain. I know new angles. Let me go out here and step out and do what I need to do. Talk to me about the moment you decided to change your mind, to get out there and free yourself up to be the person you wanted to be.
Matt, I don't know if there's one moment, but this gives me the opportunity to talk about something that I don't think I've ever spoken about. And I think it fits into the theme of this show, which is manhood and evolving manhood. And it's, as I said, I grew up always kind of feeling like I didn't have a problem that I didn't create for myself, right? You know, I come from means, I have a family that loves me, whatever. That breeds a lot of complacency. And it really wasn't until my relationship with my wife where I very much started to see something that challenged me the same way that you're saying, right? This whole, like, how you show up is how you have to stay. That really started to challenge me, because I married my wife. I knew that she had a history where she had this really traumatic sexual abuse thing happen when she was younger within her family, tore her family apart. I know she was coming at it from trauma. She was always very clear with me. And as we came closer and closer together, I made a very conscious decision to not keep the fronts that I have with everybody else, right? Like, it's very easy for me to come across as this polished dude from the outside looking in. I don't really have to share a lot of insecurities for people to buy into, yeah, I believe in this guy, right? Yeah. But as I got closer and closer to my wife, I very much decided to be very honest about this idea of leaving meat on the bone, this idea of, you know, I feel like I'm the modern age equivalent of like Huck Finn out here, where I'm just like kind of like hoodwinking everybody into doing stuff for me and me looking good, but not really ever learning anything. And the more honest I got with her about it, and then conversely, the more I saw how hard she worked every single day at overcoming the obstacles that were put in front of her, right? So at a certain point, all this stuff came to a head when I met her kind of like right after her first breakthrough with therapy and stuff like that. And then things were kind of like good. And then there was this whole other traumatic moment that re-happened to her, where she struggled with pre-cervical cancer, and the invasive procedures brought back some flashbacks, and you know, a couple of things coincided. And it also happened around the same time that the Me Too movement broke out. So it's like you couldn't get away from the conversation. Right. And at that point, I saw her just really going to work on what she's doing. And in the meantime, I was kind of coasting, right? Like I had sold my, you know, I got acquired. My first business that I started was this green building consulting thing. I got absorbed by my biggest client, came in-house as director of sustainability. About a year or two into it, I had everything dialed in. I was just like on an island without really a career track inside the company. But because I was the in-house expert, nobody was ever really going to question like what I'm doing. Like they didn't have like the background to question what I'm doing. And to them, everything was cool, but I was working like 15 to 20 hours a week. And I knew that as soon as somebody takes a closer look, something's going to shake up here. But I was just kind of writing that out, right? Like I was writing that out, investing in the whole community stuff that I was doing, but I really wasn't working on myself. And there was a moment at the cooking dinner together when she was just like, well, you know, why aren't you doing this or why aren't you doing that? And I'm like, boo, you know, you are working really hard on yourself because you're trying to like, you know, overcome something. I don't have anything to overcome. Like I'm good, right? Like I'm cool. Like you can't have the same expectation for yourself that you have of me because I don't need it. And I had this like out of body experience where I'm like, who is this asshole? You know, like as those words came out of my mouth, I'm just like, is this how I want to show up? Right? Like, am I really just saying, nah, I'm good punting on 3rd and 1 while you're like going for it on like 4th and 25 from your own goal line?
Wow.
You know,
I hear you, Pablo.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's the competitive nature in me or just or just the, what is right. Like I did not want to show up in my relationship as somebody that was going to just watch somebody do all this work. And I was just kind of coast with what was given to me, right? Like I saw her taking what was given to her and make so much more out of it. And again, when I talk about my father and my grandparents, I think about these guys that had nothing and they took so much more out of it, right? So like, what's my excuse, right? Like I like to say that if Ted Kaczynski would have had my parents, he would have been Bill Gates. He wouldn't have been the Unabomber. You know what I'm saying? So like, I need to take what I'm given and not coast on it, but I got to improve it. And I'm not going to improve it if I'm just showing up as that person that's just like, I'm cool with the status quo. And it was at that moment that I really just made this decision of, I got to seek, man. Like I know that I don't know what I'm seeking, but I got to seek because my marriage is not going to work out long-term if my wife is always seeking and always improving. And I'm the dude that's just looking around and be like, no, we're good. You know, I think that was really the moment, man. I've had other major aha moments in my career that have been these revelations, but I think that was the singular moment that really transformed my idea of I've gotten as far as I'm going to get with what I've already put the work into. From here on out, if I want to like reach that next level, it's going to have to come from within. And that was about 4 years ago.
Thank you for sharing that. I think the biggest thing that hit me that you said was the comparison to sports. You were given the playbook. You were given the quarterback spot. You were given all the plays. You called all the huddles. And then your wife, life circumstances, put her in a game that she didn't want to play and put her on the track team. Yeah. But she didn't have a chance to see what sport she really enjoyed. So then she had to run all those miles to make sure when she looked to the left or right, whether she wanted to play a different sport, volleyball, softball, whatever it is, or play football, right? And then she started to challenge you because women incubate, they make you better. And she made you better. And I'm sure a lot of great things are happening since you decided to open up. And we appreciate you. We appreciate you letting people know that a great woman makes you better.
100%, bro. Like, listen, the night I met my wife, the next day I was like, you're my muse, right? Like you're my muse. Like I've never been so inspired by meeting somebody. We met, you know, it's like a date movie, right? Like story, where we met in this wedding in Venezuela and it all worked out really, really well, man. And it's held true. It's held true, right? Like my greatest inspirations, a lot of the source of just how hard I go at the work of Brené, everything from just like, you should check out Brené Brown to calling me on my own bullshit kind of stuff has been really, really instrumental, man. And we've gone through some dark moments in this battle with her trauma and while growing personally and, you know, really challenging the status quo. But I go back to this moment, man. There's been times back against the wall where I'm just like, is it time to put my mask on first as this airplane's going down kind of thing? And to be honest with you, dude, there was this really serendipitous moment that happened I lost my brother to pancreatic cancer. And in his final moments, right? Like he passed away like January 3rd. And we had this really spiritual moment with him on Christmas night where he's clearly on his deathbed and we're gathered around the bed, and he's struggling to speak, but he's kind of just, it was kind of this like everybody around saying goodbye to him kind of thing, with him giving his like final counsel. And I was really struggling with the idea that my task, my role that he had put on me was to be the man in his son's life that would help him transition through this, right? And I really heavily questioned myself on that. And as we're all having our final things, I'm like, Bert, I don't know if I can do this, man. I don't know if I can replace you in Danny's life. And he was in hospice. We're Catholic, so we had a Catholic hospice, and the priest had told us that there's going to be these moments where it feels like he's in between two planes. And when I leaned in and he spoke to me, he said, you don't have to replace me in his life, right? You just got to be you in his life. Just like Marta told you, just be yourself. And that was this advice, he's like, what he said was, follow what Marta tells you. Like, she has been telling you, you don't have to replace me in your life. You just have to be you. Just follow what she says. And that's not a conversation I'd ever had with him, right? Like, that was just like, I was having this with my wife as like this insecurity is bubbling up. So this was one of these like in between the spiritual planes moments. And I've kind of taken that as my brother seeing that within my relationship with my wife is the answer to not just this moment, but it is these answers. And at our deepest, darkest moments, when I'm questioning whether or not this can work out, because she was like in the darkest pit of her trauma, and I was in like the darkest moment of my transition from like believing in myself to being out on a limb to breaking the limb off and then trying to build the airplane on the way down kind of thing. At that moment, I would just take these like walks on the beach and try to talk to my brother. And it always, that idea that this message from another dimension through my brother's mouth was the one that said, no. She has been your guiding beacon. She has been your muse. Lean into that and continue it. You can't let this go. Has really been something that's carried me in some pretty deep, like in two specific, very dark moments of our relationship. So that's to the point of your wife, your partner, one relationship that you have that can be so important to you, that can really, really bring out the best in you. And the perspective of femininity in your male mind, I think, is a point not to be missed, because that brings you balance, right? Like somebody that can like juxtapose you but complement you at the same time, and fill you in on the perspective that you need / be the rock for you when you're down. But it comes with the work of you need to do the same thing right back. Like it's got to be reciprocal, and it's got to work, right? Like I know that there are times in our relationship where I'm like, she's on empty, I gotta do extra rowing, extra pushing of the car here. And I can't get stuck on the short termness of it. Like, I feel like I'm doing everything. I just gotta stay in this mindset of what can I be doing, right? Like, what can I do to contribute? Because I know that there are times where I'm on empty and I need that piece. And I think everybody kind of needs that.
I think everything you're saying in my mind metaphorically speaks of to a gallon of water, a jug of water. You come as a gallon of water. You come full because you think you learned all these things in life. But when you pour some of yourself out, the most important thing I want to take my hat up to you is allowing someone to fill you up. That is the biggest step you can make to being a better person. Because if you leave your lid on while someone's trying to pour into you, nothing gets in. You have to take the lid off and allow people to pour inside of you. And that's what you did. You met a person who grew you in all the ways you needed to grow. Even though you had so many things to unlearn and relearn within inside your own water jug, you still left space to grow. And that's the most important thing that people need to understand. Allowing people who love you, who are in your corner, to actually help you grow. That is one of the first steps of how to get back up in those dark moments. Goal setting, I would say, and then allowing people, the right people, the people with intent that have always been there, allowing their voices and allowing their energy to soak you up to help you stand up. It's not
I
just
agree. I agree. And I would add that in order for that to happen, you need to be generous with your water. Like
Mhm.
you need to be generous with what you had when you were full and not be worried about keeping it full and be worried about, how can you distribute this water in ways that fills other people up so that when you are low on water, they have enough to give you too. So but yeah, the accepting piece is huge.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, man, for sharing all of that. Do
Appreciate it, man.
you have a vision board?
I don't have a physically made vision board, but I did at one point in early 2019 when I went from this construction life to taking this opportunity at a startup to proving my thesis working at this startup, right? Like understanding that I had figured out how I knew I had amassed the pieces that I needed to create my future of proving that community creation is the future of business development, but I hadn't really partnered with the right guy that I wanted to build this empire with. So I walked away from that, and this is the out on a limb and snap it off, right? Like I had this conversation with my dad about this. Yeah, this is. I had this conversation with my old man of just like, I'm not taking the obvious move. I'm taking this other move, and it has nothing to do with the health of the company, nothing to do with, the dollars and cents of it all, right? Like at the end of the day, I took a lower salary to move to a cheaper place. I left behind my network. And when it became time to realize that I got a whole bunch of value out of this interaction, but this is as far as I want this interaction to go, because now it's spilling out into other things because the partnership isn't right. Mm-hmm. And I decided to, all right, I'm just going to quit. And at the end of the day, I knew that my worst case scenario was I'm going to spend a year doing something as different from construction as I possibly could imagine, which is like the online world of entrepreneurship and selling on Amazon, online arbitrage, right? Like the grittiest kind of like form of it all. And I knew that middle ground would provide a fertile place for me to reinvent myself. So I knew that was the worst case scenario, and I was there and I was willing to accept it. And I took it off. And then my wife, right, told me, I'm a connector, man. I get opportunities thrown at me all the time, right? Like my problem is saying no, as opposed to like, what am I going to do next kind of thing.
Right.
So it was my wife's idea to say, all right, you just, broke this off. You can go look for your next opportunity and fall in love with the next guy that, offers it to you, which is kind of my weakness. I fall in love with everybody that I meet, right? It's my weakness and my superpower, right? Why don't you take a 90-day detox? Why don't you take a pause, figure out where you want to be in 10 years and reverse engineer from there? And that 90-day purposeful pause that I took at the beginning of 2019 completely changed my life. So I did spend 90 days thinking about not making a vision board, but thinking about what does my next 10 years need to look like? What is my destination? What is that all about? What does that mean? Like, what's my lifestyle? What I want to be known as, what I want to be working on in 10 years, and reverse engineer from there. So, long story short to saying that, no, I don't have a vision board.
No, but it's okay that you don't have one, but you have a vision. If you can give us one apex goal that you achieved and one apex goal you're currently chasing within this realm of where you want to be in 10 years.
Yeah, man. So, I took that 90-day purposeful pause. And I didn't know where I was headed, right? I just wanted to figure it out. I didn't have this language of whatever. And my move was I booked 4 conferences, and because I knew that I was going to be anxious, not taking action. But what I wanted to be was spinning it, right? Like I wanted to just be talking to people, be like, yeah, man, this is what I'm thinking about. What do you think? Yeah, no. All right. What about this? So I came out of this like 90-day cycle with a spreadsheet of like 450 people that I had connected with. That are now happy to take my call because I showed up as just like, hey, I'm here to be friends and talk to you about what I'm passionate about and find out what you're passionate about, right?
Absolutely.
And that iteration led to this vision of I want to prove to the world that community creation is the future of business development, right? So that is where I sit. And this last year, 2020, I proved it one time irrefutably of exactly how the fuck you do this, right? Like I took a client that is $150 million company, and I've been working with him for a little bit over a year now. And we took what they were doing, implemented my beliefs and my process and my architecture around everything that I thought would make this thing go. And by December 22nd, we started January 28th, 2020. This is a company that's been around for 14 years, been in the Inc. 5,000 fastest growing companies the last 8, been on the front page of the Wall Street Journal twice. They win best place to work in Jacksonville every year for the last 6 years.
I want to announce my first book, 10 Most Effective Ways to Reignite Self-Love. It's a deep reflection and deep dive into yourself, how to make yourself better overall. Check it out. It's available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. If you want more info, email me at SOULutionsformen@sheen1.com or the author at sheen1.com. Let me know. You can RSVP one if you like. Now back to the show.
We started this show, right? Like I can explain the whole formula, right? But we started this show that was meant to drive community inside their clientele while creating all this content that drives sales and creates relationships with strategic relationships. Started January 28th. December 22nd, we had a fan appreciation show that turned into an hour and a half of client/community member after client/community member coming into the call and talking about like, man, this show has been such a value to my life. I feel like I'm a part of a community, and being a part of this is exactly what's made me want to do business with you, right? So an hour and a half of like 6-minute after 6-minute testimonials of that. And Q4 of 2020 was their biggest quarter that they've ever had, right? So like if you look at the graph, it's like audience growth and revenue growth, same. And Q4 has been the biggest quarter they've ever had, with the biggest pipeline going into another quarter that they've ever had. And like January has now been the biggest January they've ever had. February is becoming the biggest February they've ever had. So I felt like Jordan winning his first ring. Like I was chasing this like one championship, which was just like, yes, this is it. This shows that I know how to do this, not just for myself, but as a service, and not just for an influencer, but $150 million company that is already a certain place. So that is to me I have proven that this is a viable strategy that wins big time, right? Like now this guy is like my number one, right? Like he's one of my best friends, my client at this point, right? But he's also my biggest fan, and like introducing me to everybody and telling everybody, dude, in 14 years of marketing, I have never done something so that has me in such a good shape and this and that, right? So that's irrefutable. Now my vision is, how do we bring this to everybody, right? Like my vision is a future where you see somebody across from you, and the more different than they are to you, the more of a value that you see in them, not the more scared you are of them, right? So my vision is this: how do we indoctrinate the world in this process of, if you can figure out who you're trying to serve and you can find out where you rely in that equation, right? Like, what is the value I have to the people who I'm trying to help? And then have the humility to understand that there's a whole bunch of other stuff that they need. And if you can be the one that identifies how to present them with that value by seeing it from within your clientele themselves or prospects themselves, your network, people at arm's reach, and present that value, like how you can systematically identify the value that people have to offer and put it on a stage so that it promotes that, right? Like that is the vision for me of how you prove to people that, like, yes, you can learn from others. And if you get really, really good at identifying the value in each person and articulating that value, then you've created this relationship flywheel for yourself. So the future vision is, right now I have this $90,000 a year B2B client acquisition service, right? That is being sold to 20 to $150 million companies. And I'm like landing them like hotcakes. My pipeline is out 2 months of just like people that want to do business with me that just got to go through my cycle. So that's happening. The next move is publish the book where it's like the formula. And then the next move is publish, and that's on the way. Ghostwriter's hired, framework is done. So right. Once I have that out, then the vision is, all right, you've read this book and you want to do this for yourself. You can't pay me $7,500 a month. How can I create the architecture of something that like enables people, like right now I have done for you. How can I create the architecture of do it for yourself? And then once we get past that part, it's how can I create the architecture of teaching people how to do this for others? Right. So that's kind of like the three levels that I got to get. And within all that is a software play, where what I'm really working on is relationship scaling. So I want to design this category that is relationship scaling. And what I mean by relationship scaling is it's not CRM, it's not marketing, it's not networking, it's, you know, it's not social media. It is how do I design the software that is the Zoom webinar, also tied into the video editing software, tied into the distribution that functions as CRM, so that everybody that you're talking to, you can very seamlessly be like, oh, Sheen just talked to Pablo, who knows really in-depth content strategy, and my CRM has this catalog of people that are in a certain part of their business where what they need is content strategy. How do I very seamlessly take this 1 hour conversation and share with them the best 5 minutes that are most applicable to these people so they can learn from that? And if they want to connect with Pablo, they can connect as well. Right. So that's the vision of it. Is the big goal is creating this category, having people understand that we are now in this phase of the world where we're able to have more relationships than ever, right? Like you've never been able to like wish your buddy from middle school that you hadn't talked to in 10 years a happy birthday on their birthday. Then, you know, now you can, right? So that means you have way more relationships than you ever had before. You're able to keep up with way more people. What does that mean for the way that our society operates? And what does that mean for business? What does that mean for community? And what does that mean for like the fabric of society? And packaging all that into a category means there's going to be some methodologies about it. There's going to be some tools like the software, and then there's going to be like thought leadership and behavioral sciences in that space. So like, to me, the formulation of that one category of like, how do we transcend what's happening right now, where we're going from being able to have this many relationships in our life to being able to have this many relationships with our life and that architecture and that thought space. That's the big vision that I really, really want to accomplish, that I think I'll get to in like 3 to 5 years.
Absolutely think you'll get there. I think one thing that resonates with me, that I've seen and I've learned from being on the show, is most men have that moment where they have to sit in the dark and listen to their own heartbeat and shed their skin. And that's when they really find out what their plan and agenda is. Some of us, it takes 35 years. Some of us takes 30, some of us takes 25, some of us know immediately. You sat in the dark and you shedded your skin. And then you picked up yourself as a free agent and went to a team that you could help win championships. And then you formulaically came up with a program that helped everybody be the best versions they can be. And that is awesome. And that is an awesome agenda. And I want to commend you, because so many of us have drive. But when we get in the vehicle, we don't know where we're going. We have no destination. You have a destination, you reverse engineer. That is a gem, ladies and gentlemen. Reverse engineer where you're going, because success is on purpose. Routine is on purpose. And only a few moments in life shall things be unpredictable. You should be able to predict where you're going in many instances if you know where you're going. So first is the destination. But I ask you, you have a tall glass of water you're trying to drink there. What type of affirmations are you telling yourself?
This world of affirmations and, quite frankly, routine and discipline is pretty new to me, man. Right? Like I feel like I'm somebody that I never bought into discipline, because the combination of talent, and at the end of the day, I was very blessed in this extremely positive upbringing where I've always just assumed stuff is going to work out. And that has been generally manifestations for me, but it's never been deliberate. As I get to this moment now, where my whole life people have seen me as this like kind of CEO leader type of person, and I've just seen myself as a talented dude that can spin it and can get by, right? Like the Huck Finn kind of thing.
Yeah.
And as I'm like walking off after my first championship, and I'm like, this is real. What people have been seeing in me is here. And I'm really starting to see.
I love that.
Yeah, I've really, in a way that never before, I see myself standing very vividly in a semi-industrial kind of like office space, lofty looking thing, like out of like Ballers where they like set their headquarters, talking to 45, 50 people that are my team, saying, you know, this year, this is what we did. We stuck to our core values. The vision for next year is this. Let's go do this. We're changing the world, right? Like I have goosebumps talking about it. I really see that now. And I'm trying to stay in that headspace, right? Like I've created so because of that, because I'm starting to believe it, now I'm buying into discipline. I'm like, all right, cool. I've gotten this far based on talent. I'm not going to get to that vision unless I now build in this like discipline stuff. So this to me is the year of discipline, right? Like I am setting up this morning routine where at least 5 days a week, I am journaling, meditating, exercising, learning something new, and stretching, right? So I'm trying to build all that in, and within it is this idea that whenever the alarm clock rings, I hit it and I tell myself, this is going to be the best day ever. I've been doing that consistently now since the beginning of this year. And I don't know if that counts as an affirmation.
It absolutely does, Pablo. It absolutely does, that you're building your chakras and you're adding affirmations. Absolutely. That is a gem. Absolutely. You have to tell yourself, talk to yourself. I talk about this often with other guests. Talking to yourself is the best thing you can do, regardless of how people feel about it. You have to get up, because the God in you also knows what's best for you before anyone outwardly can tell you what's best for you. That voice in your head that speaks without you speaking tells you, this is going to be the best day ever. And then you speak it into existence. This is going to be the best day ever. Yeah. So I agree with you, man. I might take that. I'm going to take that for myself when I get up out the bed from now on. I'm going to jump up and say, this is going to be the best day ever. It sends a shockwave to your senses that it is time to focus and have discipline. But along that road of discipline, please enlighten me. What have you sacrificed?
I have a hard time with that, man. I'm definitely sacrificing. I find myself having to say no more, right? Like I find myself, I used to be I still am. I'm very externally motivated, right? Like I love to serve and I love to please. And what I'm sacrificing these days is that micro pleasure I can give people in order to bring this macro value to the world, is the easiest way that I would say it.
I understand it 1000%. But when you have a focus, you start to realize what is not inside of your focus. Even though you are a very good, genuine person, people then have to allow you to grow in their minds to say, understand if he can't come to this, understand if he can't help, because that's not on his streamline of focus right now. That's not where he is. And we all start recognizing that in each other. It's even more amazing, because now we're allowing each other to grow, and we're also looking for moments where we can actually add to your focus. The best things about people who understand you is that they speak about you when you're not in the room, and they're trying to grow you when you're not there. So I think that's an important thing. But along this road of focus, discipline, and sacrifice, let's reverse it. What have you procrastinated on and why?
Dude, I procrastinate everything. Right now, I am currently procrastinating on redesigning my customer onboarding process, right? Like I've had this, I had this one really successful case study. I now have this pipeline of, I would say, 4 to 5 clients that one is likely getting started March 15th. 2 are probably going to get started by end of March or early April kind of thing. And while I laid out the framework of what their onboarding process is going to be in my head, and I sent them an email saying, we're going to have one meeting about this, one meeting about that, one meeting about that. And I have executed on these meetings in the past. I know that I'm at the point where I need to just document something that I'm going to walk in with.
Right.
And I've literally gotten to the point where my business partner, I'm like, Isar, I know that I'm supposed to be doing this. It's really not going to happen until the day before we walk in there. Right. I'm not passionate about that stuff that isn't about to move the needle when I can spend that time building relationships and continuing to add value to people and interacting with others, which is where I'm in my zone of genius.
Yes.
So I am still procrastinating on rewriting some of the messaging in my website, right? Like stuff like that is the stuff that I procrastinate on. That at the end of the day, like it sounds little, but if I'm taking this approach of discipline is going to scale my impact, right? I think that rewriting the messaging on my website is going to really, really help me affect this thing.
It sounds like a minuscule thing, but it takes a lot for me to change my bio. It takes a lot for me to go in there and rewrite things I've already given energy to, because I'm pouring out so much. I'm trying to get to the mountain, the big things. And that small thing of rewriting my bio really takes a lot of concentration that I don't want to deviate from what I'm doing right now to do it. So I understand you 1,000%. But one of the 4 agreements says always do your best. And if we're gonna do our best, we gotta be unlike everyone else and sink ourselves down and concentrate and get that done. So I challenge you, sir, find it in you. We all have to find that one thing that pet peeve that we just don't feel like tomorrow, I'll do it later. I'll do it tomorrow. Like I do that a lot. I do that a lot.
And then there's 2 schools of thoughts about it, right? Like it's like the school of thought of, do you address your weaknesses or do you lean into your superpowers?
Right. Exactly.
I'm very comfortable leaning into my superpower. I know I do this really well, man. I know that every relationship that I start with, I leave it better off. By the end of the conversation, they're better off, right? Like I know I can create value to people's lives when I'm talking to them. And I've never articulated it this way, but maybe that's that comfort zone that I'm in. Whereas I fear that I may rewrite my website and it may not be the last draft and I'm going to have to do that again. And I'm not going to do that perfectly. Well, I know that I'm always hitting singles and doubles right here all day. You know, what it's that fear of putting in that mental energy, that momentum shift into something else that I'm not 100% sure if I'm the best at the world at, but I know I got to keep moving that ball forward and iterate.
And you know what's interesting? I always look at sports analogies for myself. I say to myself, when an athlete comes back let's do basketball. When an athlete comes back with a new fadeaway jump shot, they worked on it the whole time throughout their off season. So I would like to tell people, find yourself an off season where you can go work on the weak parts of your game. So when you come back, people are like, oh man, not only does he dunk, shoot, score, whatever, he has a fadeaway now. When did he have time to add that to his recipe? But some athletes take 10 years to add that to their game.
Yeah. And then there's guys like LeBron James that's just a legit operator and is adding something to his game every single offseason, right? Like right. I deeply get that analogy, right? Like I love the NBA, man. Like my opinion on LeBron James is based around the fact that when he was in Miami in 2011 and lost that first championship to the Mavs, and you know, he was out on his limb, it snapped off. Mm-hmm. What was his response? His response was, 1, marry his high school sweetheart. 2, reach out to Hakeem Olajuwon of how can I develop a post game so JJ Barrera doesn't post me up anymore. Mm-hmm. Right. So, you know, like to me, I look at a dude that grew up as a child star, right? Like everybody from the moment he was 14, everybody around him knew he was going to be rich, without a dad. Yeah. Who, in the darkest moment of his life, decided, you know what I need is not to go crazy, is not to whatever. What I need is to go to work. And what I need is to make the mother of my children into my wife. And I'm going to just like shut it out and I'm going to be the best man I can be. And to me, that is like, you will never get me off of the idea that I think LeBron is not the best thing for sports, even no matter how much he complains to refs, no matter how much you thought the decision was crap, because you show me a man that in his darkest period, you know, found the light in the people around him and in giving back and going to work. And I tell you, that's somebody who I want my son to be like.
Absolutely. Which leads us to my next question. You're going to be the 15th person or 16th person I ask this question. It's a new question. Okay. But I will preference by saying It is a very intrusive question. So it's two
Okay.
things.
I'm in.
Wait, it's very intrusive. So I
I'm
always
in.
tell
I'm
you,
in.
you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but let me
Yeah.
know if I should keep it or get rid of it. Also, are you ready for this question?
Super in. Yeah.
What was abusive to you that you thought was love? How did
Mm.
you recognize it? How long did it take for you to accept it? What
I
was
think that's an
abusive to you
excellent question, bro.
that you thought was love? How
Yeah.
did you recognize it? How long did it take for you to accept it?
Yeah. All right. I read this book called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck, which is the new psychology of love and religion and spirituality and and relationships. And it goes into these like four sections of discipline, love, religion, and spirituality. And it was one of these like groundbreaking in the 70s psychology books that is the book that I go to when I'm struggling. It's the book I've most gifted. And inside of it, it talks about what love is and what love isn't.
Mm.
And I grew up in this Hispanic Catholic kind of like guilt framework of, I love you so much that, I care for you so much that I need to know everything you're doing and you can't deviate from the norm because I love you so much, right? Like,
Mhm.
and that is what society teaches you. At a certain point, I realized that coming from one of my parents or somebody that loves me, I've never termed it as abusive, but I would say it's degenerative, right? Like it harms you more than it helps you, because what it does is fill you in on this idea that I'm living a life for that person based on obligation. Growing up, I would always tell myself that I need to prove to the world that I deserved my upbringing. And that's still present in my language, right? Like, I know that I got to make the world better because I've been giving every opportunity to do it. And I think I have the talent to do it, right? Like, I know I have the talent to do it.
Right.
Now, at one point, I had to switch that conversation from I need to prove to the world that I deserve this away from that, because within that statement was, maybe I don't deserve this. Like that feeling, that double-sided thing of like, I love you so much, I'm doing all this for you so that you can do this for me, has a negative part of, did you really deserve this? Do you deserve this? Right? Like, you haven't proven to me that the work I've put into you and the love that I've put into you was worthy of all that love. And I don't think that my family does that deliberately. I just think it's the language that exists in our culture
Right.
is like that. And those are the patterns that they've always lived. And that's how their parents talk to them and whatnot. But that's the work that I've had to really put into, is this idea that, yeah, man, I started on third base, but that's neither here nor there. I need to stay in the zone of like, what can I do right now that makes me feel like I am in my power, serving others from my power and from the things I have to give, not what should I be doing right now that I should be doing because somebody else did for me before, and because of this, that, right? Like, there is no linear path to proving your worth outside of just, you got to be in every single moment. There is something that you can do to make the situation better. And it has nothing to do with it may or may not have anything to do with the previous moment. It's just the moment that you're in right now. What can you do to make it better for yourself, for the person in front of you, for the people around you? Like, letting go of the expectation and letting go of the guilt of obligation. And, for me, was something that manifested as lack of self-worth and really questioning myself. Once I got over that part, again, that was that conversation of, me not following your path doesn't mean I'm not grateful for the path you took, for the things that you've done for me. It doesn't mean I didn't learn from it. It doesn't mean I don't admire it. It just means it's not my path. That's neutral.
Friend to the show, Malik Mooney, a former guest, said something powerful to me. He said, You don't have to be bad for me.
Mm.
And that stuck with me in many ways. And that grew me. And what the things you're saying also grew me because, like I said, people put you here and say, hey, you're this. Why are you trying to be this? I'm comfortable with you being this, but their comfort doesn't give you joy. So when your light shines a little different, you'll see who is accepting of your shine or not. And that's how you know who's within your focus.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, man. I love that. You don't have to be bad for me. I would, in the way that I would deliver that to somebody that I care about would say, you can be great without being great for me. Right. Like, cause at the end of the day, it's like, man, I think my dad and my mom are great. Like they are amazing people, but I chose not to have kids. You know, I chose, it doesn't mean that I thought that you made a bad choice. Like I'm very grateful for my life and
Yeah.
everything you've done and the impact that you've created by having a family.
Yeah.
You know, that was great for you and you're great and you're a great influence on my life. And there's many things that I'm going to copy from the way that you go about things, right? My mom is the ultimate super connector, dude. Like I definitely get it from my mama on like the whole, like people to people, interpersonal, valuing others and being of service. I also very much veer from her in the sense of there is one way to do things, right? Like, so, you know, like I love, you don't have to be bad
Well,
for me, man.
generations always are the next best thing. They add to whatever you already built. So they're an extension. Sometimes we build a huge house next to the small house you built. Sometimes we underachieve and they build a trailer house next to the huge house you built. We're all an extension somehow. We all take pieces of each other. You spoke about uncles, grandfathers, fathers, family, brothers. I have a question for you that I like to ask all the men on the show. I always smile because it's funny to me, but in a lot of our cultural communities, a lot of things that we run from certain topics. I have a question for you. Are you ready for this one?
Yeah, bro, I'm in. Let's go.
Did you ever get a sex talk? Who or what gave you sex education?
Man. Yeah, you know, it was funny. I remember this moment. I remember there was an article about talking to your kid about sex when I was like 12, 13 in the Herald. And I'm like, Dad, when are we going to talk about? I was always the horny kid.
Hey,
Right?
is that wrong with that?
Legit. I've always been that guy, right? Like my older sister would call me the hormone. Um, and you know, like, and I was always that. So I never really shied away from that, but it was never really framed in a way that I consider healthy to society right now. Like I was all, you know, the male double standard in Hispanic society is you can be the horny predator and the woman has to be the virgin, whatever. And there is no space in between, right? Like there's 0 or 1. There is no like 0.6, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I remember reading that article and be like, Dad, let's talk about sex. Cause I just wanted to talk about like, how do I finger a chick or something. Right. Like,
Yeah.
but you know, so we had a rudimentary conversation. You know, I don't know if I learned much from it, man. I think my sexual education, quite frankly, I have an older brother that's 8 years older than me. And I was finding his like Playboys in like 1984 hidden behind like the air conditioner and whatever, you know, because we shared a room. So and then we always had like an illegal cable box, right? So we had Spice Channel early on, right? So you know,
HBO Spice Channel. The reason I asked the question is because across the board, culturally for everyone, it feels like we run from the most natural conversation in the world. And I always talk about if you don't make the right decisions or understand that you love this is going to be amazing. But you could get a little you can overdo it and end yourself in a financial situation where the government is in your relationship because you're with a person you really don't want to be with. You have these kids. But if you took the time to understand that, yes, you will sometimes meet people that you don't want to take home forever, right? That is a real thing. But we need to actually tell and let people know this is going to happen. But we run from it. We try to do reactive instead of proactive. And I just want to talk about it on the show. So any man that might be listening, they might say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna have the real conversation with my kid, or the real conversation with my nephew, niece, whatever.
Dude, I would challenge our friend that's watching or listening right now to not talk to your daughter or your niece different than you talk to your son, man. Like it's so easy to just be like, yeah, son, like I'll teach you how to get some, like,
Yeah,
and then turn around your daughter and be like, I'm gonna kill the guy that you bring home. That's bullshit, man. Like it is. It's not.
right.
It's not empowering them to make them feel like they're prey. Like it's just not. It's not an empowering thought, right? So I think it's really uncomfortable, but I try to be that in my nieces' lives, right? Like I'm bro, I am far from asking my nieces whether they're sexually active,
Yeah,
but I'm,
yeah.
I'm but I'm not. I'm trying to talk to them in the sense of like, oh yeah, you're dating somebody, that's cool. Like, like it's not this adversarial thing. And I don't know if in your culture it feels the same way, but in the Hispanic culture, it's very adversarial of just like the guy's there to win and the woman's there to lose, And so it's like, don't lose, woman, and go be a champion, guys. And
Yeah.
that's not a healthy dichotomy for society, man. I didn't start piercing through that veneer until, to be perfectly honest, I started going to a school that was full of Jewish people. And I feel like the Jewish culture handles that pretty well, right? Like I've my early kind of like non-weird, non-crazy girls that like we would hook up and then I wouldn't go crazy and she wouldn't go crazy afterwards were always Jewish chicks. And as I got to understand that culture a little bit better, it just seems like they have a much healthier outlook on the neutrality that is sexual engagement and how it just fits into society.
Yeah, it's science, right? It is simple. It's not simple. It's fun. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
But culturally, us as well, we have certain things where we say. I heard a lot of things like, "Hey, son, you jump off the porch yet?" Like just different things that you have to go out there. You're not a man until you get you something, Like, yeah. I think culturally, in many cultures, it's like that across the board, because people understand deep down inside the responsibility of what sex is and what can it do to you, how your life changes, your motivations change, what you wear, what you do, what you say. Because a lot of guys curtail their entire lives to making sure they can get what they want. You got nicknamed the hormone. I think that's the greatest nickname. Tell your sister that was amazing.
I will.
I really got a good laugh out of that one. That's amazing. And I just think we just need to talk about it some more. It shouldn't be so taboo.
100%.
Do we want our kids having sex at 12? No, nobody wants that, right? But the reality is there are some kids that are running in there unprepared and a lot of things are happening. But if we had a conversation and they can come to the adult or the person around them and they can really get some prepared knowledge and maybe some defense,
Yeah.
and offense,
Yeah.
things would be better. We should just have to talk about it because it's in our music, it's in our television, it's everywhere you look. Sex is everywhere right now. Sex is you turn on whatever you want to turn on. Your weather girl has a tight dress on, she looks amazing, right? Once you start having sex eyes, you can't unsee any of that. Yeah, it's gonna be 70 degrees tomorrow, but do you see Catherine right now? She looks amazing. She's hot. I know it's supposed to be cold tomorrow, but she is hot. Like, so it's just so many things that I just wanted to bring to the
I love it, man. I love it, dude. And I equate it to this idea that in my culture, drinking wasn't taboo, right? So like I lived in Spain as a kid, and at 8 years old, a waiter would be like, "Does the boy want some wine?" And I, by the time, and then I grew up in Miami, which is a party city, right? So by the time I got to college, I knew my way around. I knew my way around booze, and I was never the guy that was out of control at a party, that was going to do something stupid, that was,
right.
this or that. While like the guys that got there with like parents that like would refuse to expose them to that culture and not demystify it, were the blackout guys that were doing dumb shit. So it's the same with sex. It's the same with sex.
Same. I agree with that 1000%. Absolutely. Absolutely. Should there be a training program amongst men, a level of education in our communities outside of the church, outside of school, outside of the Boys and Girls Club? And what I mean by that is, let's say you and I were neighbors and you were talking about financial literacy and I was talking about how to change a tire. and we shared this information with each other. And now we give this information to the kids in the community, to our nieces and nephews, people around us. And we're just building this conversation as the topic, where we have financial literacy, communication, how to change a tire, how to change a tie, gardening, general wealth building, stocks, real estate, speaking with the elderly with intent. Do you ever think we can build a tribe of relationships to upgrade the communication level in our communities, where we have a basic level of knowledge? Because so many of us, whether we live in a small town or a big city where people don't even use cars as much, we still should have this basic knowledge of information, because eventually some people move, people travel.
Yep.
What do you think of that?
Jim, that's everything I believe. Yes. 100%, 1,000% yes. Right. Like I, to me, again, I've talked about uncles. I've talked about my parents. I was always friends with my dad's friends, right? Like I was that little kid, man. I think that the sign of a well-functioning society is intergenerational relationships. And the more that we can push to forge intergenerational relationships, right? You with someone 20 years older than you with someone 20 years younger than you, the better that we're going to make culture and society fit as a fabric. And to your point, right? Like right now we're getting to the point where that's totally doable and totally scalable, right? Like YouTube is now that. Now the next level is some curation around it, right? Like you want to contextualize to the individual. So a young kid growing up in, a neighborhood in Miami versus a young kid growing up in a neighborhood in Dubai will need a slightly different lens to it in order for it to land well. But yeah, man, I think peer-to-peer intergenerational knowledge is how we're going to get through what we're going through right now. Like there's this, I'll go down this rabbit hole. There's this theory by a 13th century Islamic scholar that society and culture goes through these cycles, right? Like they've been going through these cycles since the beginning of time. And the cycle has 4 steps to it, which corresponds to 4 generations. The first generation is the world is under a giant struggle. And these visionaries, these leaders, these people that can motivate to get all of us to congeal and go through this big uplift of pain and work to get to a new normal that's necessary. It's generation 1. The next generation is the people that take over after those guys that are so marked by guys and girls, right? At this point, right? Like so marked by that struggle that they're seeking coexistence. They're seeking what norms can we just all agree on and what can we let go so that we don't have to go through the struggle. Mm-hmm. Third generation is so removed from that struggle and so used to the coexistence that they're like, we're gonna get a little bit of me over here, right? Like that's the materialistic, individualistic generation. And then after that generation comes the 4th generation that's like, we've lost our way. Look how materialistic and individualistic we are. We need a revolution. And then the revolution starts again, right? So this is from the 14th century. You can go all the way back to Greek times and see the writings of how this keeps on happening. You want to talk in the US right now, right? Like 50 years ago, we were going through the Ruth Bader Ginsburg stuff and we're going through the civil rights movement. And now we're again going through our new civil rights movement, our new feminism movement. It's happening in that same exact time span. And my take on it is that between generation 4 and generation 1, there is going to be a massive shift because the world changes, right? Like right now, what's changed is this idea that information is free and everybody has a megaphone. And we got to figure out, again, how we scale relationships and how we're able to communicate in this new medium of communication. But that being said, all the lessons that we learned from the civil rights movement of the 70s and the women's empowerment of the 70s and all the stuff that happened and the transition of society from there to there, all those lessons can still feed this thing. So we're not just fighting hand to hand nonstop. And that the intergenerational perspective of really understanding what people went through then and contextualizing it to what people are going through right now, right? Like having the conversations between the 25-year-old and the 65-year-old right now will make it so that we don't go through a revolution, we go through an enlightenment, right? Like to me, the difference between revolution and enlightenment period and Renaissance, revolution to Renaissance is the information of contextualization of people that have done it before, because we always live in cycles, man. So yeah.
We are each other's libraries. And I think a lot of people forget to remember that. And it's I don't like it when I talk to my nieces and nephews and ask them, how was your day? And they say, fine. And that is the end of the conversation. It has to be more than that. And that's why I want to procure this conversation where if they have a stock, we can talk about stocks. If they're learning how to change a tire, we can have some type of conversation that passes on, like you said, the different cycles and information and read each other's libraries. And they can get that wisdom and knowledge from each other. Because the free thought of a young person can help free the mind of a person of wisdom who is set in his ways, and vice versa, right? So this is an amazing thing, and I appreciate your answer for that question.
I appreciate you saying that we are each other's libraries, man. That is a line straight out of the intro of my podcast, right? Like to me, this idea that there's this quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson that is, in my walks, every man I meet is in some way my superior, and in that I can learn from him, right? So to me, it's everybody that you meet has some kind of value nugget, like they've spent longer thinking about doing something that you haven't spent time doing. Right. And if you approach the world that way, every conference you walk into is a library. Every networking event you walk into is a library, right? Like how can you distill the lessons from someone else's journey into your own path, and or to be able to share to somebody else that may be taking that path, is the key to all of this. And it's the key to my success. It's the key to everything that I've done well. And yeah, I'm literally, all I'm working on is enabling that. So when you tell me, can we do this? I'm like, yeah, dog, that's what I'm doing. Like that's the key to everything.
Absolutely. That's what I'm doing with this show as well. Dr. Miles Monroe said, when someone dies early, it's like burning down a forest for all the seeds and things they could have planted. And I take that seriously. And that's why I'm putting in my 2 cents, and I'm trying to grow with you today. And I appreciate everything you had to say with all the comments. And we are doing it. We are being the changes we want to see.
This is one part of our legacy. You may go on to have children. I may go on to have children. You may go on to have a building named after you. I may go on to have a building. I may start a nonprofit, whatever. But at the end of the day, this content that we're putting out, right? Like this contextualized, this is what I was thinking with the world under this scenario, and this is how I'm reacting. And when you consume this content, you're going to have the perspective of, well, that worked or didn't work, or I liked how this worked and how that didn't work. This is a legacy, man. You know, like I really see people that are making content right now. Like I look at D-Rock. I think he's the most important historian of our time.
You got to enlighten the people why you feel that about D-Rock.
I mean, so D-Rock is the guy that follows Gary Vee around with a camera and takes everything that Gary Vee is doing and saying and distributes it out to the rest of the team for them to put it out into LinkedIn and Instagram and podcasts and YouTube channels, right? So when I think about it, again, it goes back to this whole reading the book about Steve Jobs' life 10 years after he died, or reading the book about Steve Jobs' life as he's writing it, right? So it all has value, and we're always going to be able to, my brother, bro, right? Like I have this one video of my brother singing this song Pedro Navaja while he's driving and like just jamming out, that I love to watch it. Right. How much would I love, you know, my brother was this guy that we have this like family email chain, and his thing was every time there was a birthday, he'd write somebody like a poem about them. Right. Like my mom saved all those, right? Like how much would I love right now to be watching conversations of my brother talking to somebody at 40 years old and just shooting the shit and trying to figure out like him saying what he's saying, right? Like I there was, you know, something else that really shaped me was this idea that my brother at a certain point told me that he felt that he had already peaked. This was before he got sick or anything like that, right? Like telling me that he had already peaked and telling me that like, listen, man, I've just been doing all this work, just accepting the fact that I've peaked and it is what it is. And I'm like, how can you say that? But now as I approach, now I'm 40 and I'm in 2 years, I'm going to be the age he was when he passed. Will I agree with him? Right? Like I would love to be able to revisit that, like what he was thinking, what he was saying in content for my brother. I would love to go back and read my grandfather's journals as he was thinking about, bro, do I leave Cuba? Like, do I shut it down or do I go? right? I'm now doing the work of just like having these like structured conversations with my dad about his life and whatever, and recording it and having this, because I'm dude, that's someday he's not going to be here, man. And again, in his walks, I can find a lot of lessons that right now may not land on me, but if I revisit it in 20 years, I might be like, yeah, motherfucker was right, or like this is what he was wrong about.
I tell people all the time that you should interview your parents. No matter good, bad, or indifferent how you feel about it, interview your parents, because a lot of us are brainwashed when we're little. When we're little, it's just mommy and daddy. We don't know that they have their own life, their own struggles, their own worries, and you can't even resonate with that because you don't even know what a bill is. You don't know what is going on in the world. You're just a child in this world, in your small world. And I encourage everyone to interview their parents. We got a few more questions, and then I'm gonna let you out of here today. I know I want to thank you for sticking around for so long, and the conversation has been great.
Yeah, I got a hard stop at 9:30 for me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, hard stuff. I'm with it. I'm watching the time. I appreciate that. I want to poll you. I want to know the top 3 things you like in a woman. The top 3 things that's for you. And the reason I ask this question is sometimes I feel that men leave a certain one out. Now, this is subjective. There's no wrong answer. I just want to have the conversation about which one I feel is left out. Now, if you say it, we can still talk about it. If you don't say it, I'll tell you what it is.
Yeah, cool, man. I would say, like based on my wife, top 3 things I like on a woman is she has to have a really strong sense of self.
That's big.
You know, I need to be with somebody that has their own view of shit, right? Like I before meeting my wife, I was engaged, and I literally broke off the engagement 5 months prior to the wedding because I'm like, dude, we get along great, but this is somebody that has kind of just subscribed to what you're supposed to be doing at all times and does it. And that's the opposite of me, right? Like I'm a fence tester. So I know that that's going to lead to some clashing, but I definitely need, like, the thing that most attracts me in a woman is this like idea that she's going to pick her own, she is making her own decisions, right? Like that's one. That to me is sense of self. I need a woman that is really good at something, man. You know, I need to be around, you know, the woman that I'm most attracted to, all are just like, dude, I need to add that tool to my tool belt. You know, like I need to see that in them. And, you know, 3, I would say it's some level of physical attraction as well, right? I need to, you know, I would be absolutely lying if I told you that there didn't have to be. It kind of comes with it though, man. Like I think sense, you know, like doing your own thing and knowing that you're good at something makes you more
attractive,
more apt to like have sex in a way that you're pleasing yourself and pleasing someone else.
You know what? You on to something there, sir. A woman who really is in tune with herself is a lot of great things that go with that. And one of the things I ask people to add to that list, whether it's not in your top 3 or not, is intelligence. Now, I say intelligence because it's not guaranteed. A lot of people assume it is, but it's definitely not. And some of those conversations can be very attractive as well. And along with her intelligence, along with her ambitions, and along with her self-love, and she's intelligence, like all different levels of intelligence, there's different levels of intelligence. But you add some of those things like that into it, man. Right there, that's foreplay. that's a high level of foreplay.
When I describe my wife, one of the first things I describe is intelligence.
Yes.
I think that I was wrapping intelligence into that second part, right? Like
you did.
There's many types of intelligence. You know what I mean? Like emotional intelligence, book intelligence, kinetic intelligence, right? Like there's many forms of intelligence, but yeah, absolutely. The proof.
The second one you wrapped it completely. I just the word intelligence I used, but the second 100%, definitely
100%.
I definitely said the second one. I was like, yeah, this is good but I'm starting to feel, in my perspective, that self-love is probably the most important thing in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And self-like.
Mm-hmm.
Like and love. I believe those are two different things. But I think a person needs to master both of those before they can disseminate it to anyone else. Not master, but just have sense of it at least.
Yeah, be working on it.
Be working on it, right? Because if they run from it, it's gonna hurt everybody.
Yeah. You know what I have found, man, that is the most important part of relationships is boundaries. And that includes self-love, right? Like to me, like the perfect boundary, I think Brene Brown said this, right? But the perfect boundary is the distance from when I can love myself and I can love you equally. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have that well-defined, then you bleed into these areas that are somewhere between entitlement to lack of self-worth. Right. So that perfect boundary in a relationship, and I'll bring it to an anecdote, right? Like one of these really dark periods in our life, right? Like the end of my 90-day thing was this like euphoric thing where I found something, but a month later, shit hadn't popped off like I wanted it to. And my wife was in like a deep, dark hole she was very depressed at the time, and she was really questioning everything. And we got to this point where I knew our anniversary was coming up. A couple weeks prior to that, she kind of looked at me and said, "Why are you even here still? Can't you tell I've given up on myself? And can't you tell that, you know, that we're not going anywhere here and this and that?" I was like, you know what? I'm here because I've always believed in you more than you believe in yourself. And I still see it. And I think this is a temporary thing and it's going to get better. And that's why I'm here, because I think it's in my own best interest, to be perfectly honest. Right. But a couple of weeks later was our anniversary. I knew that I had to make a significant effort for it, right? Like I got her this like bird feeder that I hung out in front of our kitchen window because she loves birds. Surprised her with it in the morning. I planned the day to go to the springs and like float down this lazy river and have a beautiful outdoor day. Took the day off of work to do it, and the entire day passed without her having done an outward gesture towards me. Right? Like, no, like, let's take a picture and post happy anniversary, no card, no sexy time that night, right? Like, you know, there was no outward gesture. The next morning, as we were having breakfast, I'm like, listen, I'm not an idiot. I know what's happening here. I know you're depressed. I know that you have told me that you've given up on yourself, ergo given up on me as well. I'm still here for my own self-interest. I know that you have the ability to overcome this, and you overcoming this makes me a better person. That being said, all day yesterday, I was out on this limb asking you to step out there with me, and you never did it. And there's a shelf life to that. You know, like at some point, I'm in here again. I'm short term, yes. Oh, I'm doing this for you. I'm supporting you, but I'm in it for me long term. And at a certain point, there's a shelf life to you not out there on that limb with me. And the moment that we had that conversation, Sheen, our relationship got way better, bro. Like it went from me like continually retreating to me holding my ground and saying, this is the boundary, and there is a boundary. And I know that this could end in divorce or this could end in happily ever after, but there is a boundary here.
You just referenced one of my favorite movies of all time with Robin Williams and Cuba Gooding Jr. What Dreams May Come. I don't know if you ever seen that film, but in that film, real quick summarization, because I know we're going to shut this down in a minute. The film is about a married couple who had 2 kids. The kids die in a horrific car accident. The wife loses her mind. She checks herself. She gets checked into a mental facility. She's giving up on herself. The husband comes with divorce papers in one hand and release papers in the other hand. And he says to her, I don't want to do this alone without you. Now you can sign these papers, or you can come with me right now. And you know, basically I have this limb, I have olive branches stand out to you. So she goes with him and they repair their life. A year later, he dies in a car accident and she's left alone. And when she's left alone, she's a painter. So she starts painting and he's in heaven watching her paintings because they're soulmates. But then she kills herself because she can't stand losing all of that. So what happens when you kill yourself and, you know, biblical, you go straight to hell. His love was so strong that he compelled God and his guardian angel to take him to hell to go get his wife. So sometimes we have to reach that far and that deep for something we know is good for us and good for them at the same time. I love that movie. If you've never seen What Dreams May Come, is a old 90s film, early 2000s. Check it out. It's a great movie to watch.
I saw that movie as a kid, but you just totally made me want to rewatch it again with my wife. That sounds awesome.
The movie's amazing. It's an amazing film. As a husband, would you rather have a great woman or a great wife? Now, this question is subjective. And now you have, there's no wrong answer. But when you answer why. Be very brief because we're closing it out. But let me know how you feel about that.
Man, as a husband, I'm a partner, man, and I need a partner, right? So my head immediately went to great woman. But I think the connotation of wife doesn't have to be a bad word. To me, it just means that you are my partner in all things financial, spiritual, romantic, personal.
Right.
So I think you need a great wife. Like I think, or husband if you're a gay dude, right? Like whatever it is, if you're gonna plan your life around someone, the game of marriage is a constant game of what is the equation of this compromise? Is this compromising me, or is this giving up something for the goal that we're trying to reach? And a great partner is someone that is willing to do both, right? Like sometimes you gotta have an end in mind that you're working on together. And naturally, for a lot of people that manifest as kids, when we don't have kids, so I don't have that crutch. I have to every decision, every day that I choose my wife and choose building something together with her is the day that I am making the choice of, you know what, me and her paired up together make up a greater sum than the parts. So you need somebody like that. I need somebody like that, which to me says it's a great woman that has decided and chosen to be a great wife and be a great partner.
Absolutely. Great answer, sir. Now, you answered this question earlier without knowing I was going to ask it, but I'm going to run through this really quickly and we're going to get ready to close out.
Yeah.
I came up with something called operating at 100%. And what I mean by that is I took 5 categories: purpose, health, confidence, money, and knowledge. Again, that's purpose, health, confidence, money, and knowledge. Purpose means you're living your purpose, doing your due diligence, working towards your goals. Health means you're eating right, working out, praying, and meditating. Confidence means you're doing it confidently without any insecurities, fear, or any did I say insecurities? Intimidation, excuse me. Money means you made a little money, saved a little money, donated to a charity, or invested a little money. And knowledge means you took in some new information. So that's purpose, health, confidence, money, and knowledge. Mr. Pablo, I ask you, within the last 24 hours, how much of 100% have you been operating out of when it comes to purpose, health, confidence, money, and knowledge? 20% each.
Man, I want to say I'm in the 90s, right? Like I'm if I were to say there's an area that isn't at 20% per, right? Like purpose, I'm on purpose, right? Like I'm very clear on that. I have never felt more confident about my abilities to deliver.
Health, you said you work up, you get up and make
health, bro. I don't know if you checked my Instagram lately, but I had a sweet picture of me surfing yesterday morning. I went on a 4-mile run today at 5:15 in the morning with Greg, the guy from JWB, who's my business partner. I would say in wealth, I took a little, like I am right now lining up my ducks to buy my second rental income property. And Peloton took a little bit of a dip yesterday, right? Which was what I was going to fund it with. I still think I'm good. And in confidence, 2 days ago, I was told that a client that had given me a verbal yes is now rethinking everything. Yeah. But yesterday, 2 new people showed up that are just like, hot and heavy and ready to bite on it, right? So like maybe a little bit lacking on the wealth and the confidence piece based on a couple of those things, but I think I'm operating in the mid to high 90s, man.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. Continue the hard work. Thank you, sir. You are now part of the Silhouette Boys Club. It is people like you who move in the shadows to help people like me shine. Now, before you go, we love to get referrals for the show. Is there anyone you like out there that you would like to tell us about, connect us with, that can come on this show and talk about this conversation in manhood?
Yeah, man, for sure. I would love to introduce you to my buddy Jerry McNamara. I would love to introduce you to my buddy Wally Conway. Both a couple of these intergenerational relationship guys that I think are super duper woke and really on it. My buddy Daniel Holmes, who's a fighter and a coach for kids, and also a good marketer in his own right. I got a million recommendations to give you, man. Listen, if I could go back to that purpose, wealth, health, knowledge, and confidence.
Yeah.
In that 90-day period that I took to reverse engineer everything, right? Like the reason why I think I'm operating at 90% is what I want to give is the idea that in the second conference I went to, I heard somebody say, if you're going to build a business that isn't anything other than you using your superpower as the thing that's going to drive the business, go get a job. Right. Yeah. And, so I've really stuck to that, right? Like I've really stuck to this idea that all I've ever cared about is making friends and making people friends with each other. How can I make this into a real business? And I found that the formula to do that, and because I'm doing that, because I'm in my superpower, taking at bats in my strike zone, serving the world with what I think is my gift, then that allows me to be very aligned. And I think that's a 4-step process. The first step is figure out what you love to do that you're also really, really good at, right? Like whatever that is that you are wired for, that you love doing, that you're really, really good at, that people notice you for, you got to identify that piece, right? That now becomes your superpower. The next part is generally when we have those gifts, we use them for ourselves. Figure out how to serve others with that gift, right? So like identify your superpower, identify a way to use it to help other people, right? After you figure that out is identify a way to monetize that service in an authentic fashion, right? Like in a way that doesn't feel like you're selling out in order to monetize that service. When I look at me, my superpower is that I see something extraordinary in everybody that I meet and I fall in love with them, and I'm really good at communicating it, right? So like I'm a great friend maker. So first it's like I figured out I'm really good at making friends. Then I service it by, I found a way to service people by, I'm really good at getting other people to connect with each other, right? Like I'm good at serving in this capacity, not just like who's going to be my friend, but who's going to be your friend that you introduced through me. Then third was a little bit harder, right? In that 90-day period, as I'm trying to figure that out, it was like charge for introductions, have a mastermind, all these things that I didn't want to do. It didn't feel right. And I stuck to this idea of like, nah, bro, that cheapens the interaction for me. It doesn't feel like my superpower. And I ended up creating this company where I'm essentially just a world-class hype man, because what I'm doing is helping people create content about themselves and the people around them while I moderate the conversation and then turn this into like relationship flywheel. And once I figured that out and it worked one time and I was able to monetize genuinely the service that comes from this place of power for me, now it's build and scale a business around that. So now that I'm in step 4, I'm just always aligned because I'm always just using at the end of the day, my business runs because of my ability to like meet people, make them feel like they have value to offer and be like, yo, we got to put that value on a platter for everybody else and everybody around you's value on a platter, right? So now that I'm in that spot where I identified my superpower, I used it to serve others, I figured out how to charge for that in a way that is genuine and is more valuable to the person that I give it to than what I charge. Now building a business around it has it so that I'm just always doing something that I am passionate about. So I'm in purpose. I'm always learning how to do it better because I really care. Mm-hmm. I am making a bunch of money doing it because I love doing it, right? Like what are the other ones? Oh, I'm confident in it because every interaction that I have is a positive feedback loop about how I'm supposed to do it. And then what was the 5th one?
Health, you doing that.
And health. And I'm energized, man. Like I've never been more energized than I am right now because I'm just always working on what I love. And what I love working on is not subtracting from what I'm supposed to be working on.
Absolutely. That was great, man. And I love your competitiveness to make sure you always operate at 100%. Before you go, is there anything you'd like to say to the people? Any information you'd like to leave where they can follow you, do things with you, let them know about your podcast? We only got a few minutes to go.
Yeah, sure, man. Listen, if I was to leave some knowledge with people, is don't try to be a king. Try to be a kingmaker, right? Like if you're trying to be king, you're just going to compete with everybody for the throne. If you're the kingmaker, then everybody that wants the throne wants to be your ally, right? Like another way to put that is don't try to be the star of the stage. Try to be a stage, right? Like being that connection point where people are able to realize their hopes and dreams by working with you is who you want to be, not the person that is trying to figure out your hopes and dreams to the detriment of other people, for other people to lose. That would be the number one piece of knowledge that I would impart on people. And then last is I would encourage you to check out my podcast, Chief Executive Connector Podcast. That's my baby. I would encourage you to check out episode 69 and episode 7, which those are my last call episodes where I went through and I kind of copied Kanye's last call and Logic's last call. And I did this like storytelling, rapping, ranting thing about 2019 was the beginning of my business. The 2020 is how like I've established my business, but it's all done going in and out of like talking and rapping and like having a motivational speech over beats that I had custom produced. And it's really the two coolest things that I've ever put out. So I would hope you check out the Last Call 2019 and Last Call 2020.
For those listening, you can reach me at soulutionsformen@gmail.com to be a guest on the show. Also at Sheen1 and all platforms. Let's continue this conversation on Clubhouse, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We end today's show with a quote from Dr. Miles Monroe. True success is not measured by how much you have done or accomplished. It's not compared to what others have done or accomplished. True success is what you have done compared to what you could have done. In other words, living to the maximum is competing with yourself. It's living up to your own standards and capabilities. Success is satisfying your own personal passion and purpose in pursuit of personal excellence. So question of the day, question of your life. Are you maximizing your life? Ladies and gentlemen, this has been SOULutions. Mr. Pablo Gonzalez, thank you so much. I wanted to get a chance to talk to you about that picture of Outkast on your wall, but you spoke volumes of what episode 7 and 69 is all about on your podcast. He is a hip hop lover, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to let him go about his day. Thank you so much, sir. Have a good day.
Thank you, Chima. Appreciate it, man.